So it takes some time to know like what's for you and what's not for you. In terms of learning something, any kind of technique, I think it's important to go into it. Like choose one, and for the time being, just do it. Like really go into it. Like learn all you can about it, and stay focused, and really work it, and see if you can learn it. And at a certain point, you'll have it, but it takes some time. So there's a real focusing down period of time that you need to really grok a method, to really understand that tool. And once you have that, now you've got something solid that you can take with you. It's in you now. And then if something else is interesting, go after that. But don't go after a ton of stuff all at the same time. I'm Michael Max, and this is Qiological, the podcast that curates East Asian medicine and methods through the power of conversation. You don't know much when you start out. It's not your fault either. It's the nature of things that at the beginning, you only have the spark of an idea that maybe there's something down the road, but it requires walking far enough down a path to see what's actually there. It might be the ultimate in trust to set your sights on something that you've no idea if you can accomplish or not. It could be the ultimate in hubris to think that you can achieve something that you've got no experience with. It does take a trust in yourself that you've not yet earned. It requires genuine courage to set off with the certain anxiety of knowing that failure is a very real possibility. In pursuing anything worthwhile, for sure failure will be one of your traveling companions. I was listening to a podcast conversation recently. It was about dopamine, the neurotransmitter that we all love so much because it tickles the neurology in a way that's experienced as deeply, deeply satisfying. The thing about dopamine is that you get a big whopping release of it when you successfully accomplish something. You could say that we're wired biologically to seek and accomplish. We're built to feel good when we improve and get better at something. It helps us in our process of developing and maturation in that it's part of this circuitry that has you putting skin in the game. The bigger the risk, the bigger the dopamine reward. So, in a sense, we are wired biologically to be a bit adventurous, curious, and striving, because when you do that, it makes you feel good. Of course, starting off with anything new, you're like the 0 card in the tarot deck, the archetypical fool, the innocent about to step off of a cliff. You're an idiot, and there's no way around it either. In fact, that effusive energy of trust and potential, it's completely necessary, or you'd never start. Think about the beginning of anything worthwhile that you've done. If you can't look back and see where you've been a fool, then you're either lying to yourself or you just might still be an idiot. All beginnings, they require trust and ignorance. And that's not a bug, it's a feature, because it's the working out of what you don't know. It's the wearing away of ignorance and misconception, the willingness to see beyond what you believed, and what's more, to be able to take in new information so as to become more capable and skilled. It requires a constant refinement of thinking, perception, and manipulation of your circumstances. The thing about beginnings is that they rely on inspiration, that chest-expanding feeling of possibility. It's a call to adventure, or maybe the voice of God. My experience is that it feels like something comes from the outside, but it also echoes the inside. For sure, there is a call. It might feel like a command. It might feel like an invitation. For sure, it will have an aspect of being disruptive, as it requires leaving the place where you are and journeying to somewhere that you've never been. Beginnings, they can leave you with a feeling of why me or why not? They might hold the potential of an answer, but my experience with beginnings is that they are more likely to set you off on a new path with a potent question, and that makes for a worthwhile journey. I've been podcasting for 10 years now. Podcasts were barely a thing when I started. In the fall of 2024, I was at a local business networking lunch that was just around the corner from my office. I met a fellow there who introduced himself, and when I asked what he did, he said he podcasted and he taught people how to do it. My initial thought was, so what, big deal. I didn't see how it could help my business. I already had a website and a blog, and the two of those, it brought me a steady stream of people asking for an appointment. So I asked him, why would I want to do a podcast? I've already got a website that does a great job of bringing people into my practice. My business is doing just fine. His response was, the people who would listen to your podcast are not the same as those who would read your website. That, well, for a moment, it stopped my world. And then the next thought was, I think he's right. But I didn't know what to do with that, other than explore the idea. And that, my friends, has brought us to episode number 400 of Qiological. This episode is with some of the listeners of the Qiological Community who joined me for an Ask Me Anything conversation. It's been a pretty good ride exploring the territory of the people who would not read my website. You know, sometimes you get a lucky break. These conversations come to you through the generous support of our sponsors and members. Blue Poppy, your new one-stop shop, has speedy shipping options on everything that you need for your clinic. It's Women's Health Month at Mayway Herbs. Check out the new website for learning resources on helping women with herbal medicine. Are you a creature of habit? How about making a change that helps your patients and the planet with AccuFast needles? And later in the show, raising your fees doesn't have to be a difficult process. Jane has helpful suggestions on making it easy and effective. And finally, have you considered that having a thriving, profitable practice is one of the most healing things that you can do? Julie Bear Don't Walk has, and she can help you do something about it too. Do be sure to visit the sponsors page on the Qiological website to take advantage of all the special offers our terrific sponsors have for listeners of the podcast. Picture this. Your clinic is buzzing with patients, and then you realize that you're down to your last box of needles. No need for panic, because Blue Poppy, your one-stop shop for all your acupuncture needs, they ship orders received before 3 p.m. on the same day. With a quick visit to Blue Poppy's website, you can order premium needles, herbal formulas, and that special Dr. Bob's oil that your patients love. Blue Poppy understands practitioners can't keep patients waiting. That's why they strive to get you what you need when you need it. From high-quality Chinese herbs and formulations to acupuncture supplies and clinical essentials, Blue Poppy has served practitioners for nearly 40 years with products that meet the highest of standards. Discover everything Blue Poppy has to offer by visiting www.bluepoppy.com, and don't forget to subscribe to their mailing list for exclusive offers and more.
Hi folks, I'm Yvonne Lau, president of Mayway Herbs. May is Women's Health Month, and as a women-owned and women-run business, we especially love how Chinese medicine can support wellness through every stage of a woman's life. So in this month's newsletter and podcast, we're covering topics like PMS, pregnancy, menopause, and osteoporosis. We'll share expert insights and effective treatment strategies you can put to good use in your clinic. Our Plumflower brand line includes herbal tea pills, tablets, extract granules, and organic herbs, all of which you can find on Mayway.com. And where you can also find articles, videos, and other resources to support your practice. Since 1969, Mayway has been a trusted source for high-quality herbal products. In these challenging times, please know that we remain committed to keeping our products accessible and affordable so you can take care of yourself and your patients. As always, thank you for supporting Real Chinese Medicine.
Daily habits and routines feel comforting, familiar, easy, automatic. That's the power of repetition. You've worked out the kinks and can do it with your eyes closed. But what if you shook things up? What if you ditched the old routine and tried something new? Hi, I'm John Sten. I've practiced acupuncture for over 30 years, and together with my wife Kelly, we created the world's first eco-friendly acupuncture needle. The AcuFast earth-friendly needle system cuts your packaging waste by 60 to 90%, depending upon your needle type, speeds up your needling, gives you more control, and best of all, while you're healing patients, we plant a tree for every 2 boxes your clinic uses. Thousands of acupuncturists have already made the switch. In just the last year, they've helped plant over 16,000 trees. Since we started, that number has grown to over 50,000. So break the routine. Be the change. Visit acufastneedles.com. Your patients and the planet will thank you.
Here we go. Episode 400 of Qiological. And I'm so delighted to have a bunch of you joining me today. You know, generally on the podcast, I get to interact with people one-on-one. Sometimes in email, I get to talk to people. But it's rare that I get to sit down with a whole bunch of folks from the podcast, hear what's on your mind, have a conversation, spend some time together, chew the fat, as we like to say here in Missouri. So I'm really delighted to have all of you here for what will be the 400th episode, which will go up in another month or so, maybe 2. Anyway, I'd like to begin with letting you all know a little bit about how I run a podcast, and then we'll just jump in and see where it goes. So by and large, when I sit down with a guest, I've got a couple of I call them guiding questions. It's just a few things that have come to mind, things I'm curious about, or things that interest me about that particular practitioner or something about the work that they do. I have a few questions, and I enter into the conversation with a few of these questions in mind. I may or may not ask them. In fact, weirdly, often I don't ask them. They're just kind of in the back of my mind. Funnily, the conversation will often answer the questions I have, just because they're in my mind. It's not like I've set an intention. It's just more that the question is just floating in the air, and somehow a conversation unfolds around it. So that's how I run this thing, and that's kind of the spirit of it. So with that in mind, I'm curious to know about the questions that you have, or the comments that you have, or the thoughts, the conversation that we have about our medicine. One other thing about what works for me about the podcast, and I think it's just my own quirkiness, really. I'm very interested in the whole technical side of Chinese medicine. Acupuncture in particular is fascinating to me. There's a whole technical aspect, but there's this other part of practice, and I'm not even sure what to call it. You could call it experience, you could call it seasoning. I'm not sure what the word is for it. But it's not the what we know, it's the how we work. And I think often on the podcast, that's what I want to know about with people. Of course, there's the what you do. It's fascinating. But there's the how you work, in a way because of who you are, like how the medicine comes through each of us. And that's kind of my guiding question for what we have today. So with that in mind, let's open up the conversation. You're all welcome to join in. You just have to just let me know. You could drop something in the chat. You can just say, "Hey, Michael, I got a question for you." I know Evan wanted to say something, so Evan, we'll start with you. Good to see you.
Good to see you again, Michael. And I really appreciate being on your broadcast. I love what you're doing. I think what would be helpful maybe is just to quickly introduce myself and the type of acupuncture I practice, and then I'll pass the baton on to other people to introduce themselves and what kind of acupuncture they practice. And then I'll come back to you with my question that I had for you. So I'd like to introduce myself, Evan Mahoney. I practice 3 Korean techniques, one of which is Sa'am acupuncture, which I call the meditative acupuncture for all kinds of internal, everything you can think of. Everything in acupuncture, in theory, can treat everything. And that's kind of how I do Sa'am acupuncture. I do 2 other Korean techniques, which are kind of modern muscle balancing techniques, trigger point acupuncture, which I've learned from Korean doctors as well. I learned from 3 Korean doctors, from Dr. Chu for my Sa'am acupuncture, and then Dr. Hyung Suk Choi and Zhang Hua Lee for my other muscle trigger point releasing acupuncture techniques, which I call Korean kinetic acupuncture techniques. So that's a little bit about myself. I love to pass the baton on and just get to know other people and the type of acupuncture they practice. And then I'll come back to you with my question if we got the time for that, Mike. Is that okay?
I think we'll let people jump in as they'd like to and let us know that. So go ahead and jump in with your question.
Okay, well, I know you've been an aficionado of Sa'am acupuncture, and you did the the legendary Sa'am Chautauqua conference this past summer in 2024. It was a really amazing event, and I think it's accessible for those that are still interested in it. And it truly was an awesome time for Sa'am acupuncture, probably a historic moment. So I just wanted to ask, how's your Sa'am experience going for you, Michael?
Oh, that's a great question. I would say it's going really well. It's really one of the mainstays that I use in my practice. And I think it's a mainstay because there's a way that it ties together the 5 phases with the 6 qi in a way that for me it's just very coherent. And I was going to say it makes a kind of intuitive sense, but I think that's because I've thought about it a lot over the past few years. And I think in part as well because I'm also an herbalist. I've studied a little bit of Jingfang. I got some exposure to that from Dr. Huang in particular, and his way of looking at constitution and his way of looking at herbs and looking at herb, person, and illness, and that whole Shanghan Lun idea of the Jing, the 6 qi.
Can you incorporate some of that herbal training into the Sa'am acupuncture?
They really rhyme with each other, so yes. And I think the thing about Sa'am that's been most interesting to me is that it's tied together a lot of pieces of TCM that for me were flapping in the wind. I just didn't get it. For example, the small intestine is an organ that just gets short shrift in TCM. I never really understood it. Right? It's that fire organ, it separates clear and turbid, and what else? Not much. I mean, really, for me, not much. That might be a deficiency in my understanding of TCM. Okay? I'm going to put that out there. But with Sa'am, you look at it, it's a fire organ, but it's also got this Tai-Yang correspondence, which is cold. So it's this hot and cold mixing thing going together. There's something about the Tai-Yang, which is the outer boundary, but you've also got the fire, which is a very internal kind of thing. So it's this really dynamic organ. Here's the other thing about Sa'am that I find fascinating. And I think for me it's been important. And it's that the yin organs and the yang organs are considered equal. In TCM and in many other approaches, the yin organs get preference over the yang organs. And with Sa'am, everybody's working on in a level playing field. And so you can consider the yang and consider the yin from a place of parity, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think
that's been useful.
Yeah. I think also, especially with the Chautauqua and Toby Daly's teaching, is identifying constitutional patterns in people, which I find pretty fascinating. And I think the discussions on Facebook there's definitely like an emphasis on constitutional patterns, looking for signs of excess or deficiency. And I do that in my clinic too. Often we try to just match people's like dreams to their constitution, or and just you find all these patterns that match up with it. And it's those moments in the clinic when everything is right. You're in the zone and everything's right. The treatment's going well, and you nailed the diagnosis, you nailed their constitution. Those are like really fascinating moments. And
They
particularly
are for
with
sure.
I don't know, like with TCM, and I think there is like people trying to find constitutional. Are you a heart or kidney person? Are you a liver person? But with SOM, that's part of my practice, is just trying to look for constitutional traits in people, and I
Yes.
find that pretty. I mean, truly fascinating to find patterns in nature, and it's like this. I call it the engineering system of human health, and it's it's just remarkable, like our whole creation and how these patterns emerge, within us singly and individually. But, it's just these patterns that match up with, SOM acupuncture.
Yes. Well, like you say, there's these patterns in nature. And when we can see them and perceive them and see how they work in clinic, it puts us in a place where we can be very, very helpful to our patients. And as a practitioner, it's fun to look into like the deep workings of nature, like the deep clockwork of nature, right? And I think the 5 phases in the 6 Qi really give us an opportunity to do that. Now, the thing about constitution, and I find this interesting, this may be a little provocative, but what the heck? I think sometimes, and I know I've been guilty of this, guilty is probably not the right word. I would say there's a developmental phase that I went through where I had kind of a fetish about constitution. Like if you get the constitution right, everything else is going to be okay. You can work off that. It was like a shorthand. Like, oh, I got the blueprint for someone. Now I know what to do. And I think there's an aspect of that that's there. But sometimes it could be kind of like a fetish, like, oh, they're a fire type and you got to do this for a fire type. Well, they might be a fire type today, right?
Yeah.
Or they might have some underlying predilections for how they are. But the question is always like, how are they right now? And for sure you've got like really earthy types. They're big and they're puffy and they're water filled and they've got extra weight. And there's that, and you don't want to not pay attention to it. But at the same time, I think it's possible to overfocus on it and miss other things that are going on.
It's true, and it's an art to find these patterns, but it's also really funny. Like Peter Ekman, I love what he wrote in, I forget which book of his. I think it was The Pulse Diagnosis. And Peter Ekman, he's talking about this constitutional identification, and Peter, he's studied around the world, and he's like, I've been diagnosed with as being every constitution by several different practitioners, So he's been diagnosed by acupuncturists like as being every single constitution that there is. So it's definitely an art, like an imprecise art, but there is, which is good. I mean, the things should not be so easily identifiable,
Well, I think there's another piece, which is sometimes we diagnose people through how we think they are. And it says maybe as much about us as about them. And so that's something to be careful about. And again, I mean, it can be useful, but, it doesn't mean just because we've diagnosed as a certain way that that's set in stone. That's our perception of someone. And if it's helpful in choosing the right treatment, then that's useful and we can use it. But I think it's, at least for myself, I have to be careful about thinking I actually understand reality.
Yeah.
Anyway, we could go on and on about SOM, and we do that in a podcast of yours, which is will be aired by the time this comes up. So I'm going to refer people to that. I'd like to move on and see if other people have some thoughts or things they'd like to share or questions for me.
Michael, I have one. It's Doug. So I'm curious about how you feel about the different voices that you've heard over the Qiological in terms of a professional or academic profession that we have. I mean, what's the strengths and weaknesses of having so many different ideas and different concepts and different that it's in some way it seems like the profession needs like a core to it, and then on other hands it seems like all this different ways of approaching the medicine is its strength.
Mm.
And I'm wondering how you feel about that after having done this all, for this many years, having all these different ways of looking at the medicine. Has it strengthened your view of we need to tighten up, or is it saying, oh, this is beautiful, so many voices, so many different ways of looking at things?
Mm. Okay. That's a great question. That's a really thoughtful question. And, sometimes I see, like, well, with the ASA, for example, there's this desire, like, we want to get on Medicare, and it's like, we all need to come together with one voice right now as acupuncturists.
Mm-hmm.
And I get that. I can see that. If you want to work in the world in a certain way, you need a certain kind of cohesion that you can bring to it. Partly because my training included multiple traditions, multiple strains of thinking. We had TCM, we had Korean hand acupuncture, we had Japanese, we learned some herbs in this tradition, herbs in that tradition. My training had me looking at the plurality of Chinese medicine. One of the things that I've seen over the years is that there's different people who think in very, very different ways. They can get tremendous results in different ways. In some ways, because I've always, I'm one of these people that's like, I won't be a member of a club that would have me. So I've always been a little bit on the fringe of things. So I tend to have this, I'm like built for appreciating differences. And so I come down on that side of the medicine is powerful and the medicine is useful because there is that plurality, because there are different ways of looking at it. Because if you're really into Constitution and you want to get into that and you find a way to do it, you can do it and get really good at it, and you can be helpful to people. You can learn aspects of tradition that lean on that. If you're into something else, if you're really into orthopedics, for example, you can really go into that and go deep into it, and you can be helpful to people. So I think our strength comes out of our diversity, and it makes it like herding cats when you want to try to get us all to speak with one voice. I don't think you can get us to speak with one voice, and I don't think our strength comes from speaking with one voice. I think our strength comes from the chorus of the different voices that we bring.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, Michael, this is Tracy.
This is Tracy.
Yeah.
Hey, Tracy.
Hi, nice to see you in a while. Well, I thought I better speak up because, boy, I'm Constitution from the get-go. Right? So I was trained by Worsley in 5-element acupuncture, and yeah, it's interesting. People can be diagnosed as small intestine fire, and they're very different than, heart fire people. They're very different.
How are they? Oh, tell me how they're different.
Well, unfortunately, the percentages are not even, right? So I don't have a lot of experience with small intestine, but in some ways, they almost look like a gallbladder person, where they have problems making the right decision because there's conflicting information going on for them. And so it's the heart can only operate under the truth. But what is the truth when you have a lot of conflict going on inside your head? And that's sort of small intestines sorting through things. Is it this or is it that? So they certainly don't look like a heart protector person, right? They're less worried about being liked, what other people think of them, getting the love. They're more interested in what is the truth here?
Oh.
What can my heart rely on? So, but I never had a small intestine patient. I saw them in clinic with Worsley. So, there's all those sorts of issues.
So they're kind of a rare critter.
Yeah, they're more rare. Where say a gallbladder imbalance is more prevalent. It's not more prevalent than a liver imbalance, but there's somebody who's constantly challenged by making the wrong decisions. That's why they're timid. That it looks like fear. They can't make the next step because the gallbladder meridian running down the whole side of the body is about movement and movement of any sort. And they can't make the next move. That's what they're afraid of. It looks like water fear, but it's not. It's timidity.
Timidity. Now, is there a gallbladder excess where they're like, I know what's right and you listen to me, damn
Yes,
it?
there is. There is. Some of the points on the head have to do with uprightness. Yeah, and so they can be overly sure of themselves. Doesn't mean they still don't have issues with making decisions. They're just sure of themselves. They can still make the wrong decision. So because I came out of that background of, I was attracted to the other Korean system of medicine, which is Sasang, which is about the four constitutions. And so for me, everything is kind of based in who is this person? I'm less interested, as is Worsley, in what's wrong with this person. It's like, who would this person be if they were their authentic self? And determining who that is, and then gearing treatments to the authentic self, which of course is the healer, right? We're just trying to align ourselves with the ability that people have to heal.
Yeah.
You put an arm in a cast if it's broken, but you don't make the broken arm heal. The person has that capacity themselves.
Yes.
You help them.
You're speaking to something which I think is incredibly important about Chinese medicine, East Asian medicine, whatever we call this stuff.
Yes,
There's
exactly.
this idea, and I don't think we have it in Western medicine, but there's this idea of the zheng qi. There's that which is upright. It's correct.
And correct for them.
Yeah, and like you can be really sick. You could be on your deathbed, and there's still an aspect of the zheng because it's the who you are can't actually be made ill.
Right.
Right.
Right. And getting in touch with that is healing, even if you die,
Yes.
because you've been made whole. That's what it means to be healed.
And for me, it's part of what allows me to do the work that I do. Because look, it's tough working with people that aren't well. There's a lot of suffering. There's kind of a burden we carry. But knowing that there's an aspect of the zheng that's always present and looking for that, right? You can look at it through constitution like you do, right? Sometimes you just look at it and you see it in people's behavior. They're a certain way that it actually makes them better, right? They may not even realize that they're doing it. And you like point it out to them and they're like, oh yeah, I do that. That's a good thing. It's like, yes, it is.
My most heartfelt comment from people, the one that touched me, is they go, I don't know what you did last time, but I felt like myself for the first time in years.
Yes.
You just go, oh my God, that's it.
Yeah.
What could be better than that? That's who they're supposed to be themselves.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. 100%. I have this happen all the time. People come off the table, and they've got that look in their eye.
Yes.
There's a quiet about them. And they're like, and they'll say things like that. And then they're like, well, how long will this last? Right? They'll often ask, how long does that last? And I always like to remind them that what they feel right now, this experience they're having, this moment, it didn't come from the outside. Acupuncture cannot put it into you. It can call it out of you. It can't put it in, but it can be called out. This is you. This thing you're feeling, this space you're at, this is you. Right? And usually their eyes will get like a little wider, right? They're like, oh, like, really? Really? I can trust this? It's like, yeah. It's just wonderful.
Yeah. And the gifts that you bring to the world come from that place and from nowhere else from that place.
Yeah.
Because you're uniquely you. Yeah. which is the downside of constitutional. You tend to lump all fires into the same bucket. But it was one of the things I remember Worsley saying, I can quote him almost exactly. The person in front of you has never been created before, will never be created again. Find that person. Right?
Yeah.
It's an awesome responsibility.
This episode is brought to you by Jane, the clinic management software that honestly just makes running a practice easier. Let's dive into something that's never easy, but sometimes necessary: raising your fees. It can feel awkward, right? But here's a tip that can really help. Consider offering flexibility to your patients as you introduce the change. When patients face new fees, it's natural for them to feel uncertain or concerned. That's where flexibility can really make a difference. Offering options like a phased increase, suggesting a payment plan, or even taking a moment to talk things through can help to ease the transition. These thoughtful gestures show your patients that you're listening and care about them, which strengthens the trust you've worked so hard to build. If you're looking for more ideas on how to navigate these kinds of changes, head to frontdesk.jane.app and check out the article, How to Tell Clients You're Raising Your Fees. One last thing, if you're ready to give Jane a try, you can use the code Qiological for a 1-month grace period on your new Jane account. It is an awesome responsibility, and it's also kind of fun.
Oh, definitely. I wouldn't be doing this all this years if it wasn't fun.
I know,
Michael.
it's not a bad way to go through the day.
You're that kind of girl.
Could I interject here?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Just a couple of things as far as the small intestine and fire. I found, especially during the election campaigns, that people were overwhelmed with all of the information, the same amount of information, the variety of information. And I was always thinking there's a lack of clarity because of being overwhelmed by information.
Yeah.
And
That's excellent, I think, seeing
so
that.
I think there's a lot of it going on around there. And I see it almost as one of the arising primary problems of our culture. And I think more importantly, the world of what do you believe anymore? And if you don't have a foundation from which you are hanging your thoughts on, then you're going to be somewhat lost and you're just going to go with your gut feeling, you know. But the other thing I wanted to mention is, Michael, I just want to thank you for going beyond just technique in your Qiological episodes, and that incorporating finer aspects of thought, what goes on in the practitioner, what is Qi, what's yin and yang. These are all really important things. And I think as practitioners, sometimes we can get caught up in the categorical thinking when life itself, our categories are just models. And I think you've been open to discussing the in-betweens of the models of our practice. And I think that's really important. I just wanted to give one other example. Since COVID, I moved to another space. It's a space that was offered to me by a massage therapist where we had shared spaces in the previous 10 years, I guess. And it's located in a physical therapy space. But anyway, because she made the initial space rental and she knew the owner of the PT business, I didn't have a lot of room to have all of my tools. So I had to make a real decision. Which tools do I want to drop?
Oh.
And then I had to think in my mind, what's really important to me.
Mm.
And other than just the needle itself, I rarely use a heat lamp. I just concentrated on needling. But recently, this is the interesting part, you have an Accutron, and I was using it for years, which, if anybody isn't familiar with the Accutron, it's a device that uses electrical current, and you can use probes or TENS pads to uh, place on the person's body. And because the Accutron took up so much space and I needed a portable laptop to go with it, I just haven't used it in 2 years. But this woman gave me a call. She's having neck pain. She's in her late 70s. And I thought I want her to have the most efficient experience, but I didn't want to do electrical stim with needles, feeling that it's a little bit more aggressive. So I just used the probes on the Accutron that have electricity that goes through these Q-tips. And I have to say, she felt a difference quite a bit. And I was testing her forward, backwards, rotating side to side. So the side to side went well, but then the forward and backwards, and all I did was bladder 62, SI3 with the probes. And she's like, wow. And it's all of a sudden. And I thought to myself, you know, it's a shame I don't have space for it, but you know what? I could still do without that Accutron. And that I'm just going to do the best I can with what I've got.
This is one of the great things about this kind of medicine. And I so appreciate your comment here too about, well, I was thinking about using electrostim, but that was too much. I think that was too much for her, right? Bring in that whole idea of excess, deficiency, strength, weakness. Like, you need to titrate the treatment to who that person is, right? So something a little more gentle is going to get you, a lot more efficiency in your treatment, right? If you overtreat somebody, this is one thing, and I don't think we talk about it enough in our world of acupuncture. Overtreatment, I think, is a big issue. We often think about undertreating, like, oh, this isn't working. I need to do this. I need to do that. I need to do more. I need to do a few extra needles to cover XYZ. But if you've overwhelmed somebody, like you were just talking about, adding more is not going to make it better. It's only going to make it worse. And again, this is one of these really cool things about the medicine we practice is this capacity to look at what's appropriate. So, yeah, I mean, maybe you don't have the Accutron to use in your practice, but like really gentling needles or maybe even teishin or something. There's all kinds of ways that we can take and adapt what we do to the person. It's never boring, is it?
No. And one last thing I wanted to mention is I came across a YouTube video, and it's called The Science of Bioelectricity, a paradigm shift in medicine and biology. But anyway, this guy, extremely interesting, he was talking about how frequencies within the electrical system of the biological organism and how important that is beyond just the categories of the parts of the cell, etc. And that I do think that the future of medicine is we're in energy medicine. That's what we're dealing with here. And we're dealing with energy that's in fractal scales. It gets more dense as we go into the body, but we're also dealing with energy that's on very subtle scales. And I would say half of that, we have no true idea what levels we're working on, right? All we can do is see the results.
Yes. Well, I think in some ways that's why there are all these different models of practice and these different models of acupuncture. I forget who it was who said something about, I can't remember the phrase now, but we're talking about models. They used a different word. And, it was Doug talking about different voices. Like, do we speak in one voice or do we speak in many? And again, I think this is why there are different models, different ways of working, because, there could be different energies. There's different things that are seen by the different perspectives. Again, one of the things that I got this when I was in acupuncture school, and I guess because you're impressionable when you're first learning something. But the idea is that you need a toolkit of things so that you can use the right treatment for a particular person. Somebody might need really strong electrostim and be able to pull that out. Somebody might need something really gentle. Shift them just a little bit and to know when to use what tool. It's like my shop teacher in the 8th grade, Mr. Bicel. Probably one of the most influential teachers I ever had, my shop teacher. Used to always say, right tool for the right job, boys. If he saw us using a bandsaw instead of a, whatever saw. I think it's true for acupuncture. So your point about different energies and different levels and ways of working, I think that really homes in on really the strength of what this medicine is that we practice. Now, if we could quit arguing with each other over what's right and correct, that might be helpful. But that's a different issue. Anyway, I see that Sabina Vilms has her hand up. I think she wants to say something, so I'm going to bring her up. Sabina.
Okay. Hi, Michael.
Nice to see you.
Thank you for doing this. I have a question. I don't want to say anything. And it's kind of a follow-up on Tracy's question. And I forgot how because we wandered off.
Welcome to Qiological. We wander all over the place.
I know. But I want to take it back. So my buddy Leo Locke and we've just spent a few months teaching a course on nurturing your xing, your innate nature, according to Sun Tzu Miao, and taking that in the present. So it's been about physical transformation and emotional and spiritual. It's been about transformation to return to your true nature, your true self. So it kind of ties into the Zheng Qi conversation. So I wanted to ask you, since you, like me, we're both getting older, and we've had some conversations about being really depleted and exhausted, and I am not a clinician. So I'm really interested. The technical stuff is really great, and you are wonderful at that. But you are also, I think your pursuit, correct me if I'm wrong, is you just are very, very curious. And there are these two ways of being a great physician, an accomplished healer, a great teacher, a good human being in the world. And one is the techniques, the modalities. And the other one is something amorphous, personal growth, development, your presence, your virtue power, healing, charisma, whatever it is. It doesn't matter whether you're using, needles or moksha or herbs or feathers or whatever. And so what do you do? And you don't have to answer this, but I want you to, if you feel comfortable going there, I'm interested in what you do personally for yourself.
Okay. First, I just want to put a pun partially intended, in what you just had to say about duh. Dao de jing de duh, right? For people that may not know Chinese, duh it's often translated as virtue. Sabina and I have had some talks about this over the years, and Sabina's really dug into the whole aspect of duh as like a healing power, a kind of virtue. You could almost call it I'm going to say personal power, but that's not quite right. So we'll just start with that. It's a kind of personal power,
It is power.
But it comes out of a kind of I'm going to call it a presence and an exploration, right? It's not a power over. It's like a power with,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's like the power that runs my computer. It's the power to do something. Another way to say it would be capacity, right? When we're young, most of us don't have much capacity because, we're still developing. We're not totally formed. So we're not good at stuff. You got to work at it,
Mastery?
right? Capacity.
Mastery?
Capacity. The ability to
How
do
about
something.
mastery? Can you step into?
I'm super
mean, it's
uncomfortable.
a-
I'm super uncomfortable with the word mastery, and I'll tell you why. We have such a fetish in our profession about the masters, and I get a little uncomfortable around that. There's just I'm uncomfortable.
I am too.
And
Yeah, absolutely.
for me, mastery, maybe that's something that will show up if you keep working on your duh. All right. When I hear about and I think about the masters like Zhang Zhongjing, right? I hope I can get through this life without having to live through the horror and difficulty that Zhang Zhongjing lived with. I hope that I can live a life where I'm not dealing with epidemics and plagues and wars and all kinds of really, really super hard things that make you a great practitioner because you're dealing with a whole bunch of terrible stuff. I hope I can live a more peaceful, calm, less difficult life. I'm aiming at being a skilled journeyman practitioner. I'm not aiming at mastery. I'm aiming at getting good at my craft. And part of getting good at my craft also, I think, allows me to develop some duh. I'm uncomfortable with the mastery thing. Again, it in part because I see it so often as a fetish. And I don't really know how to approach it.
And I really appreciate that about you. And I think that is partly why you are such a great interviewer and why you also continue to grow. So many people in our profession, they put on the master hat because they have to make a living, so they have to take a job at a university or they develop their own CEU program or something, and then they get put on this pedestal because it's not just the fault of the person who assumes the master, the expert mantle. It's also we, the patients and the students, we all are looking for masters. So it's a give and take thing, and it's such a hard balance, right? But at the same time, I want to honor you for the skills that you have developed in your lifetime of questioning and asking and always growing. And I think because of that, you have so much to give in every conversation that you have on Qiological.
Doug, we'll bring you up here in just a second. So look, I'm a practitioner.
You're really special, Michael,
I'm a practitioner first, right? Podcaster second. I get to do that because it's, my IHOL. It's kind of my hobby. It's something that's interesting to me. And I think, and because I find acupuncture and East Asian medicine so fascinating, right? I'm delighted that there's a technology that allows me to reach out, and chew the fat, with anybody who will sit down for a conversation. It's super interesting. But first and foremost, I'm trying to be helpful in clinic to the people who come to see me. In terms of interviewing and that kind of thing, look, this all comes from being a Chinese medicine practitioner. Okay? Practicing acupuncture, practicing herbal medicine, practicing the medicine that we practice, that has changed me in some ways. And I would say helpful ways. I listen more. I'm less reactive to things that bother me. It's a little easier to set aside my own biases when I see them come up, if I see them come up, right? I can just set them outside the door for a moment because it's not about me, it's about helping somebody else. So, this comes back to duh in a way. It's a way to cultivate your duh to be able to practice medicine. As to what I do in my own life, this is going to sound terrible.
In a way, you've answered the question for me.
Have
because Well, in a way, you've answered it in the perfect Michael Max way. That you are growing your by always coming back to wanting to be of service. You're there for the patient, just like you're there for the person you're interviewing, or you're there for the people you're creating the podcast for.
Well, again, it's something I get to do. It brings me a bit of pleasure to be able to do it, and because it feels like it's helpful to people. I get emails sometimes from folks that maybe they're not practitioners, they're not students. They somehow heard it and they got interested, and some people have actually gone to acupuncture school. Or I'll often hear from students and they'll tell me that they find the podcast helpful. Not because they're learning some new things, but because they're getting a glimpse of what they get to do once they get out of school. So that's gratifying to know that it's helpful. As to like practices with Tai Chi and this and that and blah, 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 I'm actually not a great example. I usually overwork myself. I should sleep more. I eat reasonably well. I do have some fun, but partly, and maybe this is just my character, I like working, and I like creating. You know, shop class was my favorite class in the 8th grade, and my parents were not keen, you know, on a young Jewish boy doing more shop class. It's like you need to take more math and science and blah blah blah, right? But I love shop class and I love working with my hands and I like creating things, and so in some ways, that's what I do now. And in doing the work, it takes something away from you because you burn your life energy, but it's a worthwhile burn. You know, hopefully it sheds enough light that it's worth the burn.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'll pass it on to the next person. Thank you.
Doug, you had something else to say?
Yeah, I'm going to speak out in praise of mastery.
Oh, good.
And
yay.
Yeah. And I know what you're saying, revering the masters, but it's getting close to 30 years now, there's something that happens to me is which I feel I'm starting to understand what that mastery is within myself. And a lot of that is in music, it's being in the zone, or I guess running, being in the zone. It's that you're doing the right thing. There's less thought to play instruments. If it's a piano or it's a guitar, there's a influential book called Effortless Mastery about being a musician and just being there. And I find myself trusting that more and more. And sometimes when I'm teaching people, I've had to, what are you doing? And it's more and more, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just doing it. And so that to me is mastery. I'm not asking people to call me a master, call me grandmaster maybe, but just grandmaster. but I don't like all that reverential thing, but I do find that within myself, practicing enough. And I very well could be deluding myself. But anyway, but I feel that.
Yeah.
And that's it's a great feeling.
I'm with you 100%. And I appreciate your perspective. And that gives me something, I'm going to say positive to chew on, to think about mastery. That it's that effortless place where you're lost in the doing. You're just doing the doing. It's even that place where it's like, am I doing this or is it doing me? Because you can get in this kind of zone and it's like it takes effort. Like if you're going to play guitar, you got to be able to really rock the scales effortlessly, and then something else has a chance to come through.
There's something that I've said that, just do the music analogy some more, is you practice to your instrument and you play to the music. And a lot of this, anyway, that's something. But it's trust. And after a while, this trust becomes intuition. I know working with Engaging Vitality, that system really connected me to something, even though I don't use the techniques in the way, but the ideas are there, and that kind of trust, that
Tell me
kind of
more about
feeling.
the ideas from that you find useful in sort of.
Just it was a technique. It is a technique that tunes you into the body, tunes you into the other person, tunes you into yourself, and it, along with all the other techniques that people learn, I imagine with Pulse, with some anything that it trains you to tune into that other person, but you do that by using your intuition. Again, a big word, but you're using yourself to tune in. And so it was one of those techniques that allowed me to do that. Does that make sense? I don't know.
I'm struck with what you said about that there's an aspect of kind of having to develop and work something to a certain degree, and then it becomes intuitive. That intuition piece, it comes later. It's not at the beginning where I have an intuition. It's like this. It's like, no, you've done a whole lot of work. You've built a solid foundation. There's a whole. I mean, Chinese medicine is a very pattern matching medicine, right? You get facile with patterns, and then something else can show up.
What I tell my students is first you pretend. First you pretend that when you put the needle in, that the chi is going down stomach 36 down to the toes. You put the needle in, you pretend that. And then after a while, you ask for confirmation from the patient. Did you feel that? And start, as the weeks or months or years or decades go by, the patients feel that. And then that's when you have intuition. Perhaps it's intent, pretend, feedback, and then you don't have to ask anymore. And then you feel it before the patient feels it.
Mm. Now that's something different, isn't it? That's a whole different kind of sensing.
Yeah, I mean, I think in teaching and watching students needle, you get that. You feel it for the patient does, even across the room. It's just like you start to get it. Now I may be deluding myself, but I've got the feedback that says this intuition works.
You bring up a really interesting thing here, and it's something that's plagued me for a long time. Maybe I should say, maybe not plagued, it's more of an inquiry. I often wonder, like, okay, so what's the difference between intuiting something, imagining something, and just hoping that this shit works? you know?
And tripping out?
Yeah, and tripping out, right? Thank you. Like, oh, this whole thing's going on. Well, maybe, but like, are there ways of tracking? Chip Chase called it tracking the void, as I recall, right? So we can do it through pulse, we can do it through tongue, the way the room feels, right? If you're sensitive and attentive, you can palpate cranial rhythms and fluids, and or maybe you're sensitive to color changes on somebody. I mean, there's so many ways that I think we actually can track what's going on, and not in an imaginative way, but really in an observational way, as we learn to do it. And I'm back to your original thing here, one voice, many voices. I think there are many voices that speak to different ways that we can track this and do this work.
I mean, I think the antidote to tripping out is how well you know yourself and how much your ego is in what you're doing. If you're invested that this works and it better work and it works better than anything else, and you put all these assumptions and egotistical things on your practice, then perhaps you are tripping out.
Can you give me more of an example of what that would look like? I mean, tripping out is an interesting term. You're clearly a child of the 60s.
I don't know. I mean, you don't know it when you know it. It's hard to say. Am I delusional or not? Well, if I'm delusional, maybe I don't think I'm delusional. I don't know. What's
It's,
the question?
well,
How do we know when we're tripping out?
I think the question comes down to how do we know that we're being effective?
Well, you ask the patient.
They lie. And sometimes they don't even recognize that they're different.
Well, how do we know we're being effective?
Yeah.
I don't know. When we go out of business, I guess we're not. You never know. I mean, I think we've all had those patients where, I had a patient that comes in, she's like with all the menopausal symptoms, hot flashes, she's going nuts, da, 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 da. You say, okay, well, this is going to take, 3 months, and I got my herbs all lined up and give one treatment, and they're like, oh, everything went away. And you're like going, well, how did that happen? Wait a minute. No, no, it wasn't me, just one treatment. And then you have the
Well,
people
but now
come
wait a
in.
minute. If it wasn't you, who was doing the treatment?
I don't know.
Yeah, no, it is interesting. We have these models and these ideas of how things will go, and it's helpful. It's helpful to be able to have a model to be able to prognosticate what might happen, so we can track things. But yeah, it's the thing about acupuncture that's really fascinating to me is sometimes, not always, but sometimes ridiculously powerful things will change very, very quickly.
Right.
Which in some ways is really bothersome because they go out and they tell their friends about it, and then their friends
Right.
come in and expect the same thing. Again,
Right.
sometimes it happens, but usually it is a process.
And the worst thing can happen is that somebody comes in and they have all the signs just line up, just saying Bujang Ichi Tong
Mm.
or Chao Yawan, or just, it's like, oh, here we go again. And then that doesn't work, and that's the one I worry about. The ones that aren't a challenge but are right down the line.
Apparently, right down the line.
Right, right, right.
Obviously not.
So by the eighth session, I'm looking up Sa'am. Maybe I should have studied that. Or I'm looking up what would my teachers do, all that kind of stuff. So,
Yeah, yeah. Well, again, I think in many ways this is, look, it's the real trouble we have with practice because, oh my God, now what do I do? But on the other hand, it's like, oh, holy shit. Now what? Like, what is this?
right.
It's so interesting, especially when it looks like a fastball straight down the center. Like I can hit the hell out of that. Oops, swing and a miss.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna let other people talk. But
Okay.
anyway, thanks.
Who's next?
I have a question.
And who is this?
It's Laureen Dawson. All right. So I was only newly certified in acupuncture in April, and that's about when I found
Congratulations.
your, thank you. That's about when I found your podcast. I'm guessing I've listened to about 100 of them at this point,
Oh
about
my
one a
God.
day, one in the evening. And here's my question. I love the podcast. It's so interesting. And I find myself at least once a week thinking, who was that person? Wow, I wonder if they have a book. Do they have a course I can take? I feel like I get distracted by the next shiny object at least once a week. And I'm wondering if that happens to you. And
Does
and
it happen
how
to
you
me?
not
Why do you
get,
think I do the podcast?
well, that's what I'm thinking. I'm just wondering how you don't get like diverted down all these different lanes, and maybe you do. And if there's, yeah, so the first question is how to not be so distracted by all the so interesting people that you have on. And then if you do get distracted, are there particular things that you have found for your own practice to be really helpful? Like, wow, that was really something. I've incorporated some bit of this into my practice.
Imagine this. A patient walks into your clinic. They're carrying more than the pain in their body. There's a story there. A history woven with the stress of long days, the ache of things unsaid, and the quiet longing for something to shift. You listen, not just with your ears, but with your hands, your intuition, your heart. It's not just about needles or a formula. It's about connection, understanding the threads that tie us together, mind, body, and spirit. That is where golden flower Chinese herbs comes in. Rooted in tradition and crafted with care, their formulas are more than herbs. They're a bridge between ancient wisdom and modern practice. Every bottle, a quiet partner in your work, helping you to meet your patients where they are. Because healing isn't just about treating symptoms. It's about creating trust, cultivating belonging, and helping someone feel truly seen. Golden Flower Chinese Herbs, your partner in practice and connection, where tradition meets care. Okay, hang on, I gotta take a quick note so I can come back to this. As a kid, thank goodness they weren't using the ADD drugs on my generation that are used on kids today. First of all, because I probably would have been drugged, and I'm glad I wasn't. So I am a bit distractible. That is true. I am fascinated by lots of different things, especially things that are contradictory. I find it really interesting. Yeah, I'm kind of built in some ways for going broad on things, and I like knocking around in the weeds. So that's just part of my jung, okay? That's just kind of who I am. One of the great things about practicing acupuncture is that aspect of me, I get to bring it into clinic, because it's like, what is this? Who is this? How do we work with this? It's helpful to be able to really go broad that way when working with people in clinic, at least for me, right? In the way that I work, I can go broad. And that gives me a place to like play with that, right? The podcast also allows me to do that. Now, in terms of being able to like to take something out of it, or not get too distracted, or be able to like know what to double down on or what to go study, that's a really, really good question. And I would say, especially for you, because you're at the beginning of your practice, I think it's true for many of us at the beginning of our practice, like, well, what kind of practitioner am I, and how do I do this? And what's worth paying attention to, and what's worth studying and following, and what's worth not. I think it's partly a developmental thing. So it makes sense that that's where you are at this moment. I'm going to tell you a quick story, and then I'm going to come back and talk more about how to include, like what you know to include in your practice, or maybe the story will tell you. So some years ago, I was closing down a practice that I had in Seattle, my second one. I was going to go back to China because I was interested in a girl. So I was closing down my practice, and I had this big file cabinet full of all my notes from school. And I thought, I'm not going to store this stuff. It's the digital age. I'm going to scan this. I'm going to scan these notes because, I don't want to get rid of them. I want to have them if I need them. I'm going to scan them. And I started pulling things out to scan them. And I realized that I was actually putting things into 3 different piles. The pile of, I don't need to scan this because I know this. I use this. It's in me. I don't need these notes because this is how I work. So I could safely get rid of those notes. The other pile was things that I didn't know if they would ever be helpful to me or not, but as I read through it, I thought, I'm not going to do this. I'm not interested in this. If I get interested later, I can go buy a book. But I don't need to keep these notes because this is not me. This is not how I work. It's not that it's a bad way to work. It's not how I work. It doesn't fit for me. So I can throw those out. And then there was a third of the notes that were like, there's something here and I'm not ready to get rid. I'm not ready to let it go. So that's a sorting that came out of, I don't know how many years I've been in practice at that point, maybe 8, 9 years in practice, and some time in Asia. So it takes some time to know like what's for you and what's not for you. In terms of learning something, any kind of technique, I think it's important to go into it. Like, choose one, and for the time being, just do it. Like, really go into it. Like, learn all you can about it, and stay focused, and really work it, and see if you can learn it. And at a certain point, you'll have it, but it takes some time. So there's a real focusing down period of time that you need to really grok a method, to really understand that tool. And once you have that, now you've got something solid that you can take with you. It's in you now. And then if something else is interesting, go after that. But, don't go after a ton of stuff all at the same time. Choose something, like, go at it. I'm not saying ignore other things, but just like really focus until it's kind of in you. Does that help? Does that make sense?
Yes, it's super helpful. And I think I have been doing that. I met Toby Daly I don't know, it just happened. I met him at a conference, and there was something about Psalm that I really liked. I'd heard it on your podcast, and then you did the Chautauqua this summer.
Yeah.
Chautauqua. Yeah, and I have been trying very hard to focus and doing various courses, but like I said, I listen to the podcast about one a day and at least weekly. It's like, wow, that is so interesting. You can't believe, my Amazon account is on fire. Anyway.
Yes, we'll never be bored in this work.
Well, I'm never bored,
Okay.
When you have that kind of busy mind, you're never bored.
Well, then this is good work for you to do, because there's always something to explore.
Yeah. There is always something. Anyway,
yeah.
I do really appreciate the podcast. It makes my evenings interesting.
I'm glad you find it helpful.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I interject with just a comment, Michael?
Yes.
This is Ed. And Lorene, in regards to your question, and this is I don't know how many times you've asked this question in your podcast, Michael, but this might be one of the most popular questions, and it's certainly one of the most fascinating questions, is what brought you to acupuncture in the
yes.
Particularly Lorene, like, what I'm leaning to is, I think a lot of it may be serendipity. Serendipity may bring you into acupuncture, and it also may bring you to the right technique. And maybe it's brought you to Psalm acupuncture, as I heard you say. So I was just curious, in regards to your question, Lorene, if there's a bit of serendipity that brought you into acupuncture, and if so, just, keep going. The path may be open to you in a serendipitous manner.
It was serendipity. I'm a naturopathic physician. When I started studying, Heiner Fruhoff taught Introduction to Chinese Medicine in our first year. I tried to do a dual degree, Chinese medicine and naturopathic, and I couldn't. It was just too much, too many new things. So I stopped. I ended up living in a very isolated community. I've been in practice 27 years. For 25 years, I was trying to figure out how to study Chinese medicine from where I live, which was impossible. And then COVID happened. COVID has been my joy. I kept my practice open. I declared myself an essential service, and all the Chinese medicine first year classes went online. And I took as many as they would let me take that I could manage while also working full time. And I managed to get enough under my belt that I only needed to do some clinical hours, which I was able to commute to do. It was exhausting, but I did it. And I got enough to be certified. And then I started listening to Qiological. I just would randomly pick one because, why do them in order when you could be random? I happened to listen to one of Toby Daly's. I really loved his story about the monk. It really resonated with me. And then it turned out he was coming to Vancouver, BC, which is only three hours or so from where I live. I managed to get there, see his full day presentation. I don't know. I just liked it. I don't know. There was a certain resonance. What I was seeing in school was not working. People would have like 30, 40 needles. They'd get off the table. They did not feel better. I just didn't see TCM the way I was learning it at school working. And then I thought I'd been reading Japanese acupuncture, just a few needles. And then I saw them was the same, 4 needles. I thought that's manageable. I don't like more than 3 or 4 needles myself. I don't want to be stuck with a bunch of needles. Although those Jing Well points, I'm telling you, those are not fun.
Powerful.
But yes, they're powerful, but they hurt. Anyway.
Yeah, but do they hurt as much as the problem that somebody is bringing in to get help with?
I don't know yet. I'm not sure. I don't have enough experience to know that for sure.
Would you like a tip on Jing Well points?
Yes, I really would.
Okay, so 2 things that I found helpful. First of all, it's helpful to grab the point and hold the tip of the finger in such a way that you puff out the point so that you get more flesh into the area. Right? Instead of just trying to go into an area that's mostly bone and not much flesh, you hold it in a way so that you puff it up and you get more flesh in that area. It's especially useful on the toes as well. Okay. Mm-hmm. And UB66, is notorious for all bone, no skin. If you puff it up, you got something to stick the needle into. That's helpful. Actually, 3 things. The second thing is freehanding is better. Use a thicker needle because thick needles don't bend. A thinner needle will bend, and then it's gonna hurt. Because instead of the thrust of your needle going directly into the point, it's bending, and now you're engaging all kinds of other tissue, and you're not getting it where you want it to go. The third and most important thing, and this is in one of the old books, I can never remember what chapter these things are or which book, but that thing about putting yourself in touch and you're on the ground and you're grasping the tiger's tail, blah, blah, blah. I don't remember the whole quote. But for me, it basically means this: be okay with yourself. You got your feet on the ground. You know what you're going to do. If you're okay needling a Jing Well point, if you inside here, I'm fine with this, you inhabit that sense of presence in the moment. I'm good with this. I'm happy to needle this Jing Well point. Let's do this. It'll be fine for the patient.
Okay.
Makes a big difference.
Great.
Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm going to go to the chat here for a second, which I've been ignoring. There's a thing here from Ellen. I don't know how to pronounce your last name, Ellen. I'm sorry. But you ask here, greetings from the Netherlands. Looking back at 400 episodes, if you can undo one thing, what would it be? If you can do one thing differently, what would it be? If you could do one thing again, what would it be? That's a great question. If you can undo one thing, what would it be? Wow, that's yeah. So I'm going to tell you a story again. And we'll see if this answers it. When I was 50 years old, when I turned 50, I was in Nanjing, China. I took a month off to go work on the 10 key formula families with Dr. Huang. And so I was in China for a month. And I was excited to be back in China. And I was in Nanjing, which is really close to a place called Yixing, where they make great teapots. And so I thought, for my 50th birthday, I'm getting on a little bus. I'm going to go to Yixing. I'm going to buy some teapots. That'll be a nice thing to do for my birthday. And I get on this little dusty little bus with people spitting and smoking, and, it's stinky, and, it's China, at least at that moment in time. And I'm all excited because I'm going to Yixing. And about halfway there, I had a panic attack, which was very surprising to me. But I'm on this ratty little bus, dusty bus, going to a place I want to go. I'm in China doing a thing I want to do. I'm having a panic attack because I'm turning 50. My life looks nothing like I imagined 50 to be. I don't have a house. I don't have a relationship. I haven't put money in a retirement account for years because I've been living in China and trying to learn Chinese. My life at 50 looked nothing like I imagined my life that it should look like at the age of 50. And I was flipping out. And I'm all by myself in China, the only white guy, on a bus, and I'm flipping out. I have never had a panic attack in my life, and I'm having one now. And there's parts of us, maybe this is the Zheng Qi talking, okay? But there's parts of us that sometimes rescue us. And I remember having this thought at that moment about, okay, so you screwed your life up, Mr. Max. What would you have changed to avoid this so that you could have all the things that you thought that you should have? And I sat with it. I really sat with it. And the answer came back, I wouldn't change any of it, because changing any of it wouldn't have brought me to this moment. And I'm on a bus to Yixing to get teapots. And my life doesn't look like I imagined 50 to be. But really what I think I need to do is look at and go, what's really important? And I was thinking about, how do I phrase this? Like, if that's not what 50 should look like, then maybe I just need to rethink 50. And the panic disappeared. It just disappeared. It was gone. Poof. And I went and bought some teapots. So there's a lot of ideas, at least for me, that I think life should go a certain way. Things should be a certain way. I'm more often wrong than right about it. And that goes for clinical practice as well. Often wrong. But there's always this invitation to see what's here. And that's really worthwhile. So what would I do differently? I probably would have studied harder in anything that I've studied. And that's something even today that I think is important. It's really important when learning something new in particular to really spend some time with it and give yourself some time with it. You never know where it's going to take you. I often think if I learn this, then I'll be able to do that. And sometimes yes, but often there's other lessons. So, learning, just talking to you here a moment ago, like what should I do? Like, dig into something. With this acupuncture in particular, which I've been digging into over the past, 6 years or so, I really focused on just sticking with the basics of it and not adding other things in. Here's what I found through studying Sa'am. And maybe this is something that I would have done different when studying other things. Not add something else in from the thing that you're studying. If you're going to study something, study it. Don't throw in a few other things to, quote, cover your bases. Study it, use it, apply it as simply as possible, and check and see what result you get. Because if you do simple treatments that are directly focused on what you're aiming at, you will get feedback from the patient. Was that helpful? Was it not? Was my focus right? Was it wrong? If it's wrong, great. I've got very, very clear feedback on what was not helpful. That's really, really useful, because now your next step, you can do something different. Or if it was useful, okay, great. We can keep going in that direction. So yeah, what would I do differently? I would have been more focused in my study. So there's that. Okay. Sorry, that was a ramble. Anyone else?
I have a quick, easy question.
Yes, who's this?
For you. It's Caroline.
Caroline.
Okay, the question is, I always wonder how people find you or how you find them, because you have such a huge variety of people coming, and how you go about that, selecting people for the podcast.
Oh, that's a great question. So sometimes people reach out to me, right? And they've got something that they want to share. And if I'm interested, if it lights me up, I say yes. It often does, because, I'm curious and interested. by and large, the way that I decide who to invite to the podcast, it's a very simple rubric. Something right about here just goes, ooh, wow, I want to know more about that. Or I want to ask them about this. I mean, there'll just be a little something and it kind of goes click. And that's it. If it goes click, then I reach out and say, I'd love to have a conversation. And if it doesn't go click, then I don't. I mean, it's really that simple. It's just a little internal something.
Do you get a lot of feedback to your episodes? Do people write in a lot?
I don't know what a lot is. I mean, on occasion, people will write in and say something that they liked about it. On occasion, they'll write in and say something that they didn't like or didn't appreciate about it. I get that too sometimes. You know, on occasion, I hear enough good things from people that it sounds like it's helpful, and so I keep doing it because it sounds like it's helpful.
Do you get a lot of acupuncturists or non-acupuncturists listening in on the podcast?
Ooh, that's a great question, Evan. I think, so it's hard to know because there's really no metric for being able to measure that. My sense is it's primarily acupuncturists and practitioners. Again, on occasion, you'll have people that are just curious about acupuncture. I'm guessing that might be, this is just a guess. I've got nothing to base this on other than, well, maybe just the amount of emails that I get. But maybe 5% are civilians or just like acupuncture curious. But mostly practitioners and students.
Cool.
Yeah.
Do you have any interest in trying to reach out to non-acupuncturists, bring non-acupuncturists on board at all?
You know, I used to do a podcast called Everyday Acupuncture, which is how I got started. And that was talking to practitioners in a very everyday language to try to educate people. So hopefully if they had a problem and they heard about it on the podcast, they'd reach out to an acupuncturist. It's kind of a, promotion for the profession. And I did that for a number of years. It's what got me started. What's really funny is that I'd have acupuncturists write me about everyday acupuncture and tell me how much they loved it. And I thought that was weird because we tried to keep it as simple and as civilian friendly as possible, right? Just make it for the general public. And so when acupuncturists wrote in and said that they liked it, I'm like, why are you even listening to this? I didn't make this for you.
Yeah.
It was funny. It was one of those serendipity things that you talk about. And it was actually what gave me the inspiration to do Qiological. Like, wow, you like that? Well, let's do something where we can like dive in deep and geeky. And that's what created Qiological. I think it would be great if somebody would pick up the idea of everyday acupuncture and do something that's for the general public. But at this point, I've only got so much time, and I really like the work with Qiological more. I really like doing something that I think is helpful and hopefully connective for our profession. So if anybody out there would like to do an everyday acupuncturist like a podcast, please let me know because I'm happy to help you get that up and running. I think it would be helpful for the profession. It would be helpful for everyday folks. And if you're interested in podcasting, that is a piece of the niche that's out there if you want it.
Very good, Michael. And you got like what an archive that you've created. I mean, I hope you can preserve this because I can just imagine down the time of history, people will come back to this in 100 years, 200 years, and they'll say, oh my gosh, we got this person recording on Qiological broadcast. So I hope you find a way to preserve it because I think you've created a remarkable archive.
Well, it is on the internet.
Yeah, that's true.
Internet's forever. But, I have thought about that. I think it's a useful oral library. It's kind of an oral history in a way, right? Like old school storytelling in a sense. And because it is digital and it's available digitally and it is in a form that could be somewhat easily preserved given the nature of the internet, yeah, it is something that I think about, that at some point when I'm not doing this, maybe some school would take it over and make it an archive, or I don't know. I would like to see it go into the future as well. I just haven't figured out how to make that happen.
Yeah, I see the problem, but great. Well, great job, Michael.
Thank you. Let's see. Who else? Oh, Sabina Vilms, can you tell us about the most contentious episode you've ever recorded and the responses that you got?
You don't need to bring me up. I'm sitting back in my chair enjoying. I'm enjoying not being in the spotlight.
Too bad. Or as my kid likes to say, too bad for you. I have had a few contentious ones. A fair amount of pushback on a recent conversation with some Israelis about living in a war zone. So there was that. A lot of feedback, some of it very positive and some of it very unhappy, on an episode with Damo Mitchell on the trouble with men. We were talking about men in the modern moment. And that got lively. So there was that. Other episodes.
And it got lively. I mean, the way you hear back from people is they email you after the episode.
Yes.
After you air the episode,
Yeah.
they respond to your newsletter or something.
Yeah. And then sometimes just there's other episodes where guests have said something and the listener was offended by it, and they had a problem with me not calling the guest out on the thing that offended them. So that sometimes happens, and people will write to let me know that I should be more attentive to the important things that need to be attended to, or whatever. They just let me know that they were disappointed that I didn't comment or correct the guest or call them out on something that they said. But, really, and here's the thing, I don't always agree with my guests either. I mean, the podcast isn't about me, and it's not about if I agree or disagree. My goal with this is to let people say something that they've got to say, and do my darn best to try to be empathetic enough to understand it from where they're at and allow them to share their thoughts. Because, again, Chinese medicine is such a phenomenal set of tools and perspectives and ways of working and thinking. And I think it's important that when someone's being generous enough to share what they think about and how they work, that I give them the space to do that. It's how we get to learn from each other. And, I often think of the podcast as a kind of digital campfire. We all get a chance to tell some stories. We don't have to agree with each other. It's not about agreement. It's just about a kind of courtesy of trying to understand where someone's coming from, what they're thinking. Maybe it's useful, maybe it's not. But I think it's important for folks to have a say.
I think that's really true. And I love that about the space you create. I think in our world these days, we all self-select these bubbles, and it's really dangerous. So it's important that we all listen to other people who we disagree with, and we give them the microphone and let them talk. And I appreciate that. You have that ability much more than I do.
Well, so look, I'm actually I'm a little closed-minded, and I'm actually very judgmental. So one of the things about being a practitioner is I've had to learn to put that shit aside to be able to listen to my patients. And one of the things I like about doing the podcast is I get to put that shit aside to listen to another practitioner tell me something of how they see the medicine working. I think it's helpful. I was just talking with someone was just asking me about, how do I decide? Oh, it's Carolyn asking about how I decide who to have on. I go, there's something in here that kind of goes click. I want to know more about that. Now, I need to sometimes be careful with that because it's easy to do that. Oh, I'm just going to invite people into my bubble kind of thing. So sometimes I've had people where I go, what the hell are they thinking? Right? I was talking with someone and they were telling me about a teacher of theirs. And this teacher said, yeah, well, there's no such thing as chi. Chi isn't a thing. It's actually this physiological response. And I'm thinking to myself, and this person's teaching at an acupuncture school? Like, what the hell? And then I thought, well, that's curious. Like, really? You know, it's like, actually, I don't think I agree with this person, but I want to talk to him.
Yeah.
You know?
And that's such a wonderful response. I really think that that is your unique gift to the profession or to the moment. It's really more than just to the profession of Chinese medicine, to have that curiosity. When somebody says something that completely disagrees with your worldview. And I wish we could all do that in everyday interactions.
Well, the podcast is, you know, you're asking me about cultivation. Maybe the podcast is my way of cultivation.
Yeah.
You know, to let that bubble part go, to try to broaden my thinking or perspective. Yeah.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
That's I think that's really important for all of us.
It's not easy.
To kind of embrace the moments when somebody says something and you're like, what the hell? This is like completely opposite to the way I look at the world.
Yes.
You know, as an immigrant, whether it's immigration or as a woman, when there's somebody talking about men's stuff, or we all have these million places right now where we offend each other. And instead of being offended and walking away and taking the microphone away from them,
hand them the microphone.
Yeah. And ask them to go on about it.
Tell me more.
Themselves. That's healing.
Well, again,
that's medicine.
It is medicine. And this is what I've learned from working in clinic and listening to patients. Sometimes I have vast disagreements with them, or we think in really different ways. But they come to see me not because they're looking to get corrected in their faulty thinking. They're coming to see me because they've got a problem and they want some help. And I think that, I don't know if ability is the right word, but that that thing that I bring to the podcast that hopefully allows me to be a bit open-minded, it's really come from sitting with people in my practice who are very, 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 very different from me. And I'm not looking at our differences, and I'm not looking at our disagreements, and I'm not looking at my opinions of who I think they might be. I'm just trying to help them. And you can't help someone if you don't understand them a bit from their own point of view. Right? This is where empathy, I think, is really important. And not the empathy hang on a second, let me finish this. It's not the empathy of, I can feel what you're feeling. That's not the empathy I'm talking about. I'm talking about the empathy of that I can recognize something that they're afraid of that I'm not afraid of. That I can recognize there's something that they want, and it's not something I want, but it's something they want. Right? To have that kind of perspective, which I fail at all the damn time. But in clinic, I get a chance to come, like in meditation, I get a chance to come back to it again, like start again. And I try to do that with the podcast as well, just start again with people I don't necessarily understand or agree with.
Do you think when you start out in acupuncture school, because I used to teach beginning acupuncture students, and a lot of them are very judgmental. The college where I used to teach, they were all naturopaths, or it was a naturopathic college, and they were hugely hung up on healthy diet, and a lot of these young people had a very, very pure lifestyle or a very, very pure diet, and they were very judgmental, and that's always been, I feel like that's a piece of an evolution as a practitioner, that when you go into school, you're learning to recognize what people are doing wrong. You are learning, right? That's what gets you licensed, that you can recognize how to correct people. So in a way, in order to pass your acupuncture exams and to get licensed, in the beginning, you are rewarded for telling people what they're doing wrong. Whereas your style of practice is, and to me, true healing is never telling people what they're doing wrong and correcting their mistakes. That's not.
Well, a lot of us go into it with that. And I know that in the beginning, and yeah, developmental thing you go through, like, well, there's so much education that we have to do for our patients. You know how many patients want to be educated? None of them. Nobody wants to be educated. Anytime I hear that word education, I get really, really nervous. I think humans love to learn, but no one likes getting educated. Let me educate you about this. Nobody likes it. And I know in the beginning as a practitioner, I thought, I've got to educate my patients. I have to help them get rid of these, bad ideas that are interfering with their health. And because the universe is a very generous place, my patients would almost always ignore my advice that I thought was good for them. I think it's important that people find their own solutions. And I think it's our place to help them find solutions. But educating them and telling them is rarely helpful. And what you pointed out here, Sabina, that underneath it, there's a kind of judgmental, well, I'm the practitioner and I got like 5 years of study here, so like I know some damn stuff. I don't think it's useful. We do know some stuff. We know a lot of stuff. We should know some stuff. We should have a lot of knowledge. But acquiring the wisdom of knowing when to shut the hell up or reflect back to a patient something that maybe they've been trying to tell themselves, but they've not been able to hear. But you sometimes just quietly reflect back one little thing about them that you see that they hope someone is seeing about them. That, I think, makes a much bigger difference than trying to tell them what to do. Here's another place where we're really judgmental and it's not helpful. We have the true medicine, right? Or we're better than Western medicine because X, Y, Z. And we set ourselves above Western medicine. Look, for the first probably 10 years of my practice, this is embarrassing, but I'm going to say it anyway because it's helpful, like especially all y'all out there that are new in the practice. When patients come in, they tell you about how Western medicine has failed them or how it hasn't helped them or they've had problems. And then I commiserate, oh yeah, Western medicine, well, they, blah, 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 blah. It's not useful. All doctors are doing the best they can with what they got. And to put down another type of medicine or another practitioner or another method does not raise you up. I used to think it did. And it really doesn't. It really doesn't. It just makes you look like an asshole.
I think that's it. And it takes age, life experience, whatever. I'm working on the same skill, when I teach translation and when I see translations that are just abysmal, I'm just like, that's wrong. And then it's such a better approach to be curious about, what is it about that person that makes them take a line, use a line out of context and read it in a certain way. Why did they go down that path instead of choosing the other path, which I know is the right path because I am Dr. Sabina. It's this delicate dance where, as a teacher, where you have to stand in your knowledge, and there's like a really subtle place where sometimes people say things and they sell it as Chinese medicine, and to me it's like new agey fluff, and I just have to hold my like it's a balance between I know my stuff and the other person, like, how do you deal with knowledge? Knowledge is such a hard concept these days.
Well, there's knowledge. Look, I think about it this way these days. There's data. There's a more refined aspect of data, which is information. You go a little more refined, you get some knowledge and hopefully skills. Maybe some, I'm going to use Douglas's word here, mastery. Maybe there's some mastery that allows us to apply it judiciously. Maybe that's where mastery comes in.
And the compassion.
Yeah.
Last quick question, yes or no? Do you have episodes? Do you record, and do you ever choose not to air them?
Yes. There are some conversations that were interesting, but just not podcastable. It wouldn't work. It just didn't work as a podcast. Or sometimes, it just didn't work as a podcast. It was a great conversation, but it missed something, and so I just don't. I don't publish those. It doesn't happen often. Sometimes, just like you do a treatment, like, oh, I think this is helpful. Oh, actually, it didn't help so much. Okay, learn something. Sometimes you just go wide of the mark. Anyone else?
Hey, I'd like to add in there.
Who's this?
Raven Grace. Raven Grace.
Raven Grace.
Hey guys, coming to you from Australia.
Hello, Raven
nice
Grace.
And early in the
Look,
morning.
You got your
here.
Australian hat on.
I'd like to ask a question. What's one of the greatest transformations that you've seen in clinic? Like something that was really like, wow, watching someone change.
Ooh, greatest transformations in clinic. Wow. I'm not sure that like the big wows are the most important ones. Sometimes I think the greatest transformations are the quiet ones. Like hearing from a woman who had been trying to get pregnant, who was doing IVF, looking for some support with acupuncture around that. It didn't work. It didn't help. I said, okay, well, you're going to take a break. Look, here, take these herbs. This is going to help clear out some of the stagnation from your system. And, call me whenever you want to try again or whatever you want to do. And I heard from her a few years later about a different issue and found out that she at that point had a 2-year-old child. After taking the herbs that cleared out the stagnation, and not trying so hard to get pregnant, she had conceived, and she had a 2-year-old now, right? It's sometimes little things like that. Sometimes I remember seeing recently in my clinic a person who was having some panic and anxiety, and to see them in a second treatment, and like I could see, their face was different, and their eyes were different. It's like I could see more of who they are without all that disruptive chi that's getting in the way of the Shen. It's little things like that, or sometimes just the way people come in and, they sit down and breathe differently. It's always surprising. What about you?
Can I answer that question?
Tell me some of the transformations you've seen that were notable. What is it that you notice?
A lot of the things I do are physical kind of things. Like I also teach chakra yoga and breakdancing and stuff alongside of Chinese medicine and moxibustion and shiatsu and stuff like that. And so a lot of things are postural, the way people stand, the way they present themselves. So, having someone with their head sitting forwards and then they walk out with their head upright and you're like, wow, your posture's different. And they're like, no, it isn't. Kind of things like I just like the magic of I call it stealth for health, like walking around and finding different people. A friend got lost on a walking path recently, and I knew she was right. She was with another friend, and there were 2 park rangers there, and I thought I'd practice out on the wild. So I asked the young guys if they had anything going on, and they said, "Oh no, we're the young guys, we're the young track workers, we're fine." But this guy's really unflexible. I asked him to show me where he was unflexible, and he was reaching down for a hamstring stretch and sliding his hands down, and they could only meet his knees. And I said, "Can I touch your jaw and help you touch the floor?" And so I massaged his jaw, and then he slid down past his knees, and he was shocked. So then I was like, "Let me try your arm on the lung points," and then he went further, and then the calf, and he touched the floor, and then I just walked away, waved to them, and brighten their day with some magic.
It's fun, isn't it?
Yeah. But I was going to ask another question to you around, like, has there been any good stories where you thought, wow, this is really going bad, and then they've completely changed the other way? Like, has it been any of those kind of stories?
You mean like with patients?
Yeah, like you felt like, I'm not sure these people will make the change, and then all of a sudden they do this miraculous change. Like, any that surprised you?
Yeah. I never know how people are going to change or if they're going to change. I never know. I mean, I hope, right? There's that hope. And then there's also, the skills and knowledge of understanding something about the pattern language of Chinese medicine that, I've got an idea of how a treatment might be helpful for people. But I'm always kind of surprised to see how they actually metabolize it. And yeah, sometimes people have astounding results. Like, remember years ago, a woman getting off my table, and usually when she gets up off the table, her back hurts, and she got off the table and she's like wiggling around with a very puzzled look on her face. And she looks at me and she says, "It's not possible that my back pain could be gone, is it?" And she's like wiggling around trying to make it hurt, right? And I'm like, "I don't know. What's your experience?" And she's like, "It's not there. Is that possible?"
I love the one when you say, "Is it better?" And they said, "Well, it doesn't hurt, but it could just be my imagination."
Yeah, that's always good.
I'm like, okay, so real life evidence isn't enough for you.
Yeah, and then there's the ones like, bad shoulder pain, they can't put their arm behind their back, and it's painful. And, do a treatment, check the range of motion afterwards, and their arm goes behind their back, no problem now. But they go, "Yeah, it still hurts." It's like, oh my God, you can put your damn coat on now, but it still hurts. So it can go both ways, right? People are interesting in how they make sense of their experience. In some ways, I think it's up to us as practitioners, notice what we notice, not get too attached one way or another. I mean, of course we want to be helpful, but not get like so attached that our ego has to be fed. They have to get better for our ego to feel good. I think it's more helpful just to be observant, like, did that help or not? And if it did, in what way? Because then you just get smarter about how to practice medicine, and you end up like you know how to touch someone's jaw and they can bend over better. It's good stuff. Maybe we should come on the podcast and we can talk more about that.
Yeah, I love that. That'd be awesome.
Let's do it. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks.
Email me when we're done, when we're off this, because that would be a fun conversation. See, folks,
Cool.
This is how it gets done. Ooh, that's interesting. I want to know more.
Thanks.
That's great. All right. I'm looking through. God, there's all these comments here in the chat that I've been ignoring. This is from Andrea. This was a wonderful idea to have a conversation with your listeners. I appreciate your comment on the diversity of approaches as the strength in the medicine. As someone in school, seeing that there are shortcomings with the current system, I'm learning, parentheses, which would probably be true of any given system on parentheses. How do you go about pursuing additional styles that you would like to get into, considering that you're at the very beginning of your career and that it will take a lot of time to get really skilled with any of those styles? I see a lot of interesting offerings available, but no overarching structure tying anything together once you're out of school. Okay, that's a little bit like what Lorena was asking about here a few minutes ago. In some ways, yeah, is there an overarching structure? Yeah, like go read the Nanjing or the Neijing or, stuff like that. That's some of it. But, again, God, Chinese medicine is such a diverse ecosystem of different ideas. In some ways, you just kind of have to, at some point, say, I'm going in that direction, and then go and see what shows up. And it takes time. Here's something that they don't tell you at the beginning of your acupuncture school education. And that is, it's going to take a good long time after you got your license to really feel a sense of ease and competency with this. It takes some time. Like you can be an accountant, you can go get an accounting degree and you get out like, yeah, I can be an accountant. I can be a pretty good accountant. And I think it's really true that when we get out of school, that license we have doesn't mean we know it. It means we've got a learner's permit. And it's going to take some time. When you get out of school, you should have a good sense of the fundamentals. You should have a good sense of the underlying basics, yin yang, 5 phases, 6 qi. You should have the building blocks for sure when you get out of school. How you actually apply those building blocks, that really takes some time. And it takes experience. It just takes clinical experience being on your own, not having your teachers tell you yes or no, but like working it out on your own. And it just takes some time. So the only thing I got to say is like choose something that's interesting and go at it and enjoy the ride. Get a little bit better every day. I don't know if that's helpful. I hope it is. Linda Danzing, what are you reading now? Linda Danzing, what are you reading now?
I'm glad you asked, Michael Max.
Yes, and?
Well, this is called an exposition on the 8 extraordinary vessels, acupuncture, altitude.
Oh, Chip Chase's book.
That's right, and Mikishima.
Yes.
And I had the good fortune to be able to study with a woman by the name of Rayanne. She's an engaging vitality practitioner who's in Barcelona. And I was quite taken with the work. It really was an embodied experience to feel the extraordinary vessels in a way that I had never encountered before. And so a group of us said we'd like to dive in a little deeper, but can't quite go to Barcelona. So we got this very thick book, and we decided that we would read it together. So I'm excited about that. Like, what you've given us, Michael, through Qiological is a global community. And I feel like, as an extrovert, that's one of the greatest gifts. And so I'm excited about having like a book read along.
With this work. Read along.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that. That sounds cool. Tell me more about what that would look like.
Well, it's kind of an organic process. We decided that this wouldn't be the kind of book that would be light reading and we would just sit down on a Sunday and plug through. It would require some discussion. So we created a curriculum and we have like dates to finish certain chapters by, and then we're going to meet over Zoom and talk about it.
Wow. So an organized self-study book club.
Yeah, and anyone can join in. You're welcome to come.
Oh, okay. So how would people do that if they wanted to join in?
Oh, they could email me and I could send them the curriculum and the dates, and then they would get a Zoom invitation.
That sounds pretty cool. Would it be okay if I'll put your name, if it's okay with you, I'll put your name and your email address on the show notes page when this publishes.
That would be great.
Okay, great. Yeah, be sure to send that to me when we're done here, so just so I've got it and I can make a note.
Should I put it in the chat?
No. Email it to me.
Okay,
yeah,
will do.
That way it won't get lost.
And Michael, I really wanted to thank you for the summer of history of acupuncture in this country. Um, uh, yeah, I'm a graduate of the New England School of Acupuncture, and to have so many alumni and teachers coming from out of Massachusetts, it felt like, very family like, the family of acupuncture, and it was just a real gift. Thank you.
You're welcome. The history series has turned out to be quite popular. I do get a fair amount of fan mail on that and people telling me how much they enjoy it. So as long as I can get oldsters to keep talking to me while they're still around, we'll have that as one of the episodes every month.
Yeah, it was just fantastic.
Cool. Thanks for that feedback.
Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year. All right. Well, holy smokes, folks, we're at 2 hours. Usually these things go for an hour-ish, hour and a half. This has really been wonderful. We should probably start winding it down, but before I wind it down, I just want to see if there's anything else that needs to be said by anyone before we say goodbye for today.
Michael, it's Andrea. Thank you so much for the podcast. I was just curious if your patients ever listen to Qiological, if that has started any conversations for you in the clinic.
On occasion, I have patients that listen. In fact, I know that there is one of them listening as we speak. So yes, on occasion, patients do listen. They get to see another side of me. It's kind of fun. Thanks for asking. Anything else before we say goodbye? Just seeing a bunch of thank yous in the chat, so that's great. Well, thank you, everyone, first of all, for listening to the podcast, because otherwise, why bother doing it? Secondly, all y'all that have joined in today and contributed your thoughts and your voice, I really appreciate it. It's been fun. Like I said, usually I just talk to one person at a time. This has been a delight to talk to a bunch of different folks. Douglas, thank you for your thoughts on mastery. It really has me thinking about it a bit differently at the moment, and that's helpful. And Sabina, thank you for your always inquisitive questions, and everybody for contributing today. It's been a delight, and until next time, thanks for being here today. I want to close this 400th episode with sincere thanks and appreciation to all the people who have joined me over the years for a conversation. Also, a bow of appreciation to Neil, our tech tamer, who keeps the digital ship afloat, Ruth and Anne, who edit the episodes, and Lauren, who is our organizing force of nature, who manages to keep all the moving parts ticking along like a fine Swiss watch. And I want to thank you, the listener, because Qiological is only worth doing if it in some way provides benefit to our community of practitioners. If Qiological has been helpful to you as either a practitioner or a student, I would love to know about it. Send me the modern version of a postcard by taking a picture of where you listen to Qiological, post it on your social media, and tag us at Qiological, and let us know how the podcast has made a difference for you. Next week, we step on the road to episode number 500. Well, here we are at the end of this episode. If you've listened up to this point, you're either a rabid fan of Qiological or the forward button on your podcast player stopped working. If you are indeed a fan of the podcast, you can help us to bring new episodes to our community of practitioners by supporting us with a membership or a one-time contribution. Details, of course, are on the website. That's it for today, friends. Join us again next Tuesday for another thoughtful episode of Qiological.